Hello friends, welcome to African Tales Retold. Please subscribe to this channel and share the stories to others. By the way, to enable subtitles or captions, look for the CC icon on the video player. It will be located in the top right corner where subtitles are available. Now let's dive into the story. Salima opened her eyes, but she was no longer in Zango, nor was she surrounded by the silent ones. She found herself standing in a place that was neither light nor dark, a strange realm that seemed to shift and shimmer like a mirage. Shadows twisted and merged around her, and the air felt heavy, filled with an unearthly energy. In the distance, she could hear the faint whisper again, calling her name with a gentle, sorrowful tone. She strained to see through the haze, desperate to know who, or what, was calling her back from the brink. Salima. The voice was familiar yet distant, filled with a warmth that cut through the coldness surrounding her. As she walked toward the sound, a figure began to take shape in the shadows. A woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, someone she hadn't seen since childhood. Mother? Salima's voice trembled as she recognized her mother's face. Her memory sharpened with a sudden, painful clarity. Yes, my child. Her mother's voice was soft, filled with love and understanding. I have come to guide you, to show you a path you could not see before. Salima felt a surge of emotion, guilt, and sorrow rising within her. Mother, I've done terrible things. I was selfish and greedy. I thought I could make a better life for myself, but all I did was bring darkness and suffering. Her mother smiled gently, reaching out to place a comforting hand on her shoulder. We all make mistakes, Salima, but it's never too late to seek redemption, to turn back from the path of darkness. But how? Salima's voice broke, her despair overwhelming her. I tried to break free, but the silent ones won't let me go. They control me, and I don't know if I have the strength to resist them. Her mother's gaze softened, and she took Salima's hands in her own. The strength you need lies within, Salima. The silent ones only have power over you because you gave them your fear, your doubt. If you let go of that fear, you will find the courage to face them and reclaim your soul. Salima closed her eyes, taking in her mother's words. She had been so focused on her mistakes, on the darkness surrounding her, that she had forgotten the power of her own spirit, the light within her heart. When she opened her eyes again, her mother's figure was fading, her form dissolving into the mist. Remember, my child, her mother's voice whispered. Love and courage are stronger than any darkness. Trust in yourself, and you will find a way. And with that, her mother disappeared, leaving Salima alone in the strange, shifting realm. But this time, she felt a spark of hope, a sense of purpose that steadied her trembling heart. Salima returned to Zango, but she could feel a change within herself, a newfound strength that filled her with determination. She was no longer the frightened, desperate woman who had made a pact with the silent ones. She was stronger, wiser, ready to confront the darkness she had once feared. The silent ones were waiting for her in the shadows, their cold eyes watching her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The leader stepped forward, his gaze sharp as he observed the change in her. Salima, he murmured, his voice laced with an edge of warning. You are not the same as before. What has happened to you? Salima stood tall, meeting his gaze with unwavering resolve. I no longer fear you. I made a mistake, but I will no longer let you control me. I will free myself from your grasp, no matter the cost. The silent ones exchanged dark, knowing looks, and the leader's eyes narrowed. You are bound to us, Salima. You cannot escape so easily. Your soul belongs to us. Salima felt a surge of anger and defiance rise within her. My soul belongs to me, and I will not let you take it. With those words, she felt a strange warmth spread through her, a light that seemed to push back against the shadows surrounding her. The silent ones recoiled, hissing in displeasure, their dark forms flickering as though weakened by her newfound resolve. For the first time, Salima saw a glimpse of fear in their eyes, a sign that their power over her was not as absolute as she had once believed. As Salima confronted the silent ones, a strange energy seemed to ripple through Zango. People began to sense a shift in the air, a subtle change that made them feel uneasy and watchful. Whispers spread through the city, rumors of a curse, of dark forces lurking in the shadows. Baba Sul noticed the change as well. He had always felt a deep connection to the spirit of Zango, and he sensed that something significant was happening, a struggle between light and darkness that would determine the fate of the city. He gathered a small group of elders, those who still believed in the old ways, in the power of ritual and prayer. Together, they began to perform ancient rites, calling upon the spirits of their ancestors to protect Zango and guide them through the darkness. As they chanted and prayed, a faint light seemed to glow over the city, a protective aura that strengthened with each passing hour. The people of Zango felt a sense of peace and courage, a newfound hope that lifted their spirits and strengthened their resolve. But the Silent Ones sensed this change as well, and they were not pleased. They knew that their hold on Zango was weakening, that the people's faith was challenging their power, and they knew that Salima was at the heart of this resistance, a threat that had to be eliminated before it grew beyond their control. The Silent Ones confronted Salima one final time, their forms darker and more menacing than ever. The leader's voice was filled with fury as he spoke, his words cutting through the night like a blade. "You think you can defy us, Salima? You think your defiance will save you or your city? We have claimed the souls of countless cities, countless lives, and Zango will be no different." But Salima held her ground, her heart filled with the strength of her mother's words, of Baba Sul's wisdom, of the love and courage that now guided her. "I don't fear you anymore. You may have power, but you do not own me. I will fight you, and I will free Zango from your curse." The leader laughed, a cold, mocking sound that echoed through the shadows. "Very well, Salima. If you insist on defying us, then we will make an example of you. We will show Zango the price of your defiance, and they will know fear as they have never known it before." With those words, the Silent Ones vanished, leaving Salima alone in the darkness, but she felt no fear. She knew that the battle was far from over, but she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The people of Zango could sense that something was coming, a storm of darkness that loomed on the horizon, threatening to engulf their city. Baba Sul and the elders continued their prayers, their rituals, strengthening the protective aura that shielded Zango. But they knew that their efforts would not be enough to hold back the darkness forever. As the storm approached, Salima prepared herself for the final confrontation. She gathered the people of Zango, sharing with them the truth of her pact with the Silent Ones, of the darkness that she had brought upon them. She begged for their forgiveness, promising to fight with every ounce of her strength to free them from the curse. The people were shocked, but they saw the sincerity in her eyes, the remorse and determination that filled her heart. They knew that she was their only hope, and they stood with her, offering their prayers, their support, their strength. As the sky darkened and the storm of shadows descended upon Zango, Salima stood at the front of the crowd, her heart steady, her resolve unbreakable. She knew that this battle would decide not only her fate but the fate of the entire city. And as the first wave of darkness approached, she whispered a silent prayer, calling upon her mother's spirit, upon Baba Sul's wisdom, upon the courage of the people of Zango. As the storm of shadows loomed closer, Zango fell into an eerie silence. The villagers gathered around Salima, some murmuring prayers, others clinging to one another with fear-stricken faces. Salima felt the weight of their hopes and fears on her shoulders, yet her resolve remained strong. She had brought this curse upon them, and she would see it lifted, even if it cost her everything. Baba Sul approached her, his old eyes filled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "You've come a long way, Salima. Few would have had the courage to face what you now stand against. Remember, your strength is not yours alone. It is shared by everyone here." Salima took a deep breath, nodding as she felt a surge of warmth from his words. She closed her eyes, centering herself, drawing upon the love and support of those around her. The Silent Ones thrived on fear and weakness, but she was no longer the frightened woman they had once manipulated. With a loud roar, the shadows swept over the town square, engulfing everything in a thick, suffocating darkness. The Silent Ones emerged, their forms barely visible in the dense fog, yet their sinister presence unmistakable. Their leader stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Salima with a mixture of disdain and intrigue. "So, you choose to resist," he sneered, his voice echoing ominously. "You believe that these people, these weak, fearful souls, can protect you from us?" Salima held her ground, raising her voice with unwavering defiance. "It is not their fear you face. It is their strength, their unity, their love. You have no power over that." A ripple of energy seemed to pulse through the crowd, their collective spirit forming a protective barrier around Salima. The silent ones faltered, momentarily weakened by the force of the villagers' determination. But the leader quickly regained his composure, his eyes narrowing as he unleashed a dark, twisting wave of energy directly at Salima. Salima braced herself, feeling the force of the shadow strike her like a physical blow. She staggered but refused to fall. With her hands clenched into fists, she reached deep within herself, drawing upon every ounce of strength, every lesson, every memory of her mother's warmth, Baba Sul's wisdom, and the courage of her fellow villagers. A brilliant light began to emanate from her chest, piercing the darkness around her. The silent ones recoiled, their forms flickering as though they were being burned by the intensity of her inner light. The leader let out a furious roar, his voice thick with malice. "You cannot defeat us, Salima. We are eternal. We are the shadows that linger in every heart." But Salima's voice rang out clear and powerful. "You may exist in the shadows, but you have no place where there is light. You cannot claim what is freely given." As she spoke, the light within her grew stronger, expanding outward until it encompassed the entire square, bathing the villagers in a warm, protective glow. The silent ones shrieked, their forms dissolving as the light consumed them, reducing them to nothing more than faint whispers on the wind. For a brief, glorious moment, it seemed that the battle was won, that Salima had succeeded in breaking the curse. But as the light faded, Salima felt a sudden, sharp chill. She turned, and there, standing alone amidst the fading shadows, was the leader of the silent ones. His form was weaker, diminished by the light's power, yet he remained, his eyes burning with a cold, vengeful fury. "Do you think it's so easy to escape me?" he snarled. "You may have driven my kin away, but I will not leave empty-handed. Your soul belongs to me, Salima, and I will claim it, even if it's the last thing I do." Before she could react, he lunged forward, his shadowy form wrapping around her like a shroud. Salima struggled, feeling her energy drain as his darkness attempted to consume her from within. She could hear his voice whispering in her mind, filling her thoughts with doubt and despair. But she refused to surrender. With the last of her strength, she reached out, grasping Baba Sul's hand, and he, in turn, grasped the hands of those beside him, until the entire village was united in a circle around her. Together, they began to chant, their voices rising in a powerful, rhythmic song that filled the air with a radiant, purifying energy. Salima felt the darkness within her weaken, and with one final burst of effort, she expelled the silent one from her mind, banishing him into the shadows from which he had come. The leader let out a final, blood-curdling scream, his form disintegrating into nothingness as the villagers' chant grew louder, filling the air with a triumphant, defiant harmony. As dawn broke over Zango, the village was bathed in a golden light, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds that had long shrouded the city. The people looked around in awe, their hearts filled with a sense of peace and relief as the darkness lifted, replaced by a newfound hope. Salima stood in the center of the square, exhausted yet triumphant. She had fought for her soul, for her city, and she had won. Baba Sul placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his eyes filled with pride. "You have done well, Salima. You have redeemed yourself, and in doing so, you have saved us all." Tears filled her eyes as she looked around at the faces of the people she had once betrayed, now looking at her with gratitude and respect. She knew she had a long journey ahead, a life of rebuilding, of earning back the trust she had once lost. But she was no longer afraid. She had found her strength, her purpose, and she would never again allow herself to be controlled by fear. But as the villagers began to rebuild their lives, a dark omen lingered on the edge of the horizon. Though the silent ones had been banished, their curse lifted, a faint whisper remained, echoing in the distance, a chilling reminder that the battle was not over. One evening, as Salima stood alone on the edge of the village, gazing out into the shadows beyond, she heard a faint voice, a voice that sent a shiver down her spine. "Do not think you are safe, Salima," it whispered, the tone filled with a quiet, menacing promise. "There are other shadows, other forces waiting, watching, and one day, we will return." Salima's heart skipped a beat, but she steadied herself, her gaze unwavering as she stared into the darkness. "Then I will be ready," she replied softly, her voice filled with the strength of someone who had faced her fears and emerged victorious. Weeks passed, and Zango slowly began to heal. The villagers returned to their daily lives, the memory of the silent ones fading with each new day of peace. Yet Salima couldn't shake the feeling of unease, the echo of that ominous whisper. As each night fell, she would find herself standing at the edge of the village, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement, any trace of the shadows that once haunted her. Baba Sul had noticed the change in her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he joined her on the quiet path. "You sense it too, don't you?" he asked softly. Salima nodded, her face drawn with worry. "They may be gone, but something else lingers, as if a greater darkness lies just beyond our sight." The elder was silent for a moment, his gaze distant as he seemed to ponder her words. "There are forces in this world, Salima, ancient powers that are not so easily defeated. The silent ones were but one part of a larger web. You may have driven them away, but in doing so, you may have awakened something even more powerful." Salima's heart sank. "What should I do, Baba Sul? I don't know if I have the strength to face whatever is out there." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You are stronger than you realize. But sometimes, strength alone is not enough. Sometimes, we must seek knowledge, understanding, to face the unknown." Baba Sul's words planted a seed in Salima's mind, a spark of curiosity that pushed her to seek answers, to learn about the forces that threatened Zango. The next day, Salima set out to find anyone who might know about the mysteries she had uncovered. She visited elders from neighboring villages, wise women, and travelers who had passed through lands far beyond Zango. Each had their own tales of spirits and shadows, of curses and blessings, but none could tell her about the silent ones or the strange darkness that lingered around her village. Determined, Salima pressed on, traveling farther from Zango than she ever had before. She encountered strange lands, where people practiced rituals she had never seen, spoke of ancient prophecies, and warned her of dangers beyond imagination. Despite their warnings, Salima felt compelled to continue her journey, her need for answers stronger than her fear. One evening, as she was preparing to rest, an old woman approached her, her eyes filled with a strange intensity. "You are seeking something, aren't you?" the woman asked, her voice low and gravelly. A truth hidden in the shadows. Salima's heart quickened. "Yes, I am. Do you know anything about the silent ones?" The woman nodded slowly. "They are but servants of a greater power, a force older than time itself. Few speak of it, for fear that even mentioning its name will bring misfortune." Salima leaned forward, desperate to hear more. "Please tell me, what is this force?" The old woman's eyes darkened. "It is known as the shadow that knows. It feeds on fear, thrives in darkness, and takes many forms. The silent ones were its messengers, but they are only a small part of its reach." A chill ran through Salima as she processed the woman's words. She had thought the silent ones were the root of the curse on Zango, but it seemed they were only a small part of something much larger and much more dangerous. The old woman handed Salima a small, tattered book, its pages worn and faded. "This is an ancient text," she said, her voice filled with caution. "It contains knowledge of the shadow that knows and the ways it can be kept at bay. But be warned, understanding it comes at a price." Salima hesitated, feeling the weight of the book in her hands. She knew that knowledge was power, but she also understood that some knowledge was dangerous, a double-edged sword that could bring as much harm as good. Still, she knew that she couldn't turn back. The darkness that threatened Zango demanded answers, and she was willing to pay whatever price was necessary. She opened the book and began to read, the words filling her mind with strange symbols, forbidden incantations, and warnings of the consequences of summoning such knowledge. The more she read, the more she felt the pull of the shadows, a temptation to understand the power that lay within. As she turned the final page, she found a chilling passage. To face the shadow that knows, one must journey to the edge of the known world, to the place where light and dark meet. There, the truth will be revealed, but only to those who dare to confront their deepest fears. Salima's heart pounded as she closed the book. She knew what she had to do, but the journey ahead would take her beyond anything she had ever known. Salima returned to Zango with the book and shared her findings with Baba Sul. He listened intently, his face growing more serious with each word she spoke. This journey you speak of, it is dangerous, perhaps even deadly, but I believe it is the only way to truly end the curse on Zango, he said gravely. If you are willing to face this path, know that you do not walk it alone. We will prepare with you, offering our prayers, our strength, and our protection. Over the following days, the people of Zango gathered supplies for Salima's journey, blessing each item with charms and words of protection. Some gave her tokens of their loved ones, symbols of hope that would remind her of what she was fighting for. When the day of her departure finally arrived, the entire village gathered to see her off. Baba Sul offered a final blessing, his hands raised to the sky as he called upon the ancestors to watch over her. May your path be guided by light, Salima, he said, his voice filled with pride and sorrow. And may you return to us victorious. Salima felt a surge of courage as she looked out at the faces of those who stood with her, their faith giving her the strength she needed to face whatever lay ahead. Salima set out on her journey, the weight of the forbidden text pressing against her chest as she traveled deeper into the unknown. Days turned into weeks as she ventured farther than she had ever gone, crossing rivers, climbing mountains, and facing the elements. Each night, she would read from the book, the ancient words echoing in her mind, guiding her steps even as they filled her with unease. One night, as she camped on the edge of a desolate plateau, she felt a chill unlike anything she had experienced before. The air grew thick, and the silence was broken by a faint whisper, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Salima. The voice was deep, haunting, filled with a power that sent a shiver down her spine. She looked around, but saw nothing in the darkness. Who are you? She called out, her voice barely a whisper. The voice laughed, a cold, mocking sound that seemed to echo through the night. I am what you seek. I am the shadow that knows, and I have been waiting for you. Salima's heart pounded as she realized the truth. She had come face to face with the very darkness she had set out to confront. But she was not afraid. She knew that this was the moment she had been preparing for, the test that would decide the fate of Zango and her own soul. The voice grew louder, filling the night with its ominous presence. You have come far, Salima, but are you truly ready to face what lies within? Are you willing to pay the price for the knowledge you seek? Salima took a deep breath, standing tall as she faced the unseen presence. I am ready, she replied, her voice steady and filled with determination. The darkness around her thickened, swirling like a storm as the shadow that knows began to reveal itself, its form shifting and twisting in the shadows. Will Salima be strong enough to confront the darkness within herself and protect her village? Or will the shadow that knows claim her soul once and for all? Salima felt the weight of the shadow that knows bearing down on her, pressing against her spirit with a force that seemed to drain her of all her strength. Yet, she stood firm, her gaze steady as she stared into the swirling darkness before her. You seek power, knowledge, salvation for your village, the shadow's voice whispered, each word laced with a dark promise. But such things do not come freely. Are you willing to pay the price, Salima? Salima hesitated, feeling the pull of the shadow's influence. What price? She demanded, her voice firm despite the tremor of fear that crept into her heart. A mocking chuckle echoed through the night. Your loyalty, your will. Pledge yourself to me, and I shall grant you the power to protect your people. In exchange, you will carry my mark. A part of me will live within you, forever bound to your soul. Selima's mind raced. Accepting this offer would mean unimaginable power, a way to protect Zango from the dark forces that threatened it. But the price was steep. She would forever be marked by the shadow that knows, a piece of darkness woven into her spirit. And she knew that such power would come with a cost not just to herself, but to those around her. I am not yours to command, she replied, her voice filled with defiance. I have my own strength, my own will. I came here to protect my village, not to trade my soul for your promises. The darkness around her seemed to recoil, the mocking tone replaced by an edge of anger. You believe you can defy me? You are but one soul, Selima, fragile and fleeting. I am eternal. I am fear, and fear cannot be destroyed. But Selima refused to be intimidated. She lifted her chin, her gaze unwavering as she spoke. Perhaps I cannot destroy fear, but I can face it, and I will not be yours. The silence that followed her words was thick, oppressive, as though the very night itself held its breath. Suddenly, the shadows began to shift, swirling around Selima in a chaotic storm of darkness. She felt herself being pulled into a vision, an overwhelming flood of memories and nightmares that clouded her mind. Scenes from her past flashed before her, moments of weakness, pain, and regret that she had tried to bury deep within herself. She saw her mother's weary face, her hands worn from years of hard work, and felt the sting of shame for all the times she had failed to help her. She saw the villagers' faces, filled with distrust and disappointment, a reminder of the betrayal that had led her down this dark path. The shadow's voice echoed in her mind, relentless and cruel. You are nothing but your past, Selima. Every mistake, every betrayal, it is all part of you. Do you think you can erase your sins, your weakness? You can never outrun who you are. Selima stumbled back, overwhelmed by the flood of images. She saw her own reflection, distorted and twisted, as if she were standing at the edge of a dark abyss. The shame of her actions, the lies she had told, the fear she had lived with, all came crashing down on her. Every failure she had ever experienced seemed to mock her, to prove the shadow's words true. She fell to her knees, her breath coming in ragged gasps, as the weight of the darkness threatened to crush her spirit. But then, deep within her, a voice rose, a voice that was her own, but stronger, clearer than it had ever been before. It was the voice of the woman she had become since that first fateful day in Zango, the woman who had fought through fear, who had faced the darkness within herself and learned to stand tall. I am not defined by my past, Selima whispered, the words feeling like a lifeline. I am defined by what I do now, by the choices I make today. The vision around her began to shift. The swirling darkness receded slightly, as if the shadow itself recoiled from her words. But the shadow that knows was not done. It lashed out, sending waves of fear and despair crashing over her. The images of her past returned, more vivid than ever. Her moments of doubt, the times she had hurt others in pursuit of her own desires, the lies she had told to protect herself. You cannot escape me, Selima, the shadow hissed. You are nothing without your fear. Selima's hands clenched into fists, and she lifted her head, her eyes narrowing. Fear is just a shadow, and shadows can be banished by light. With that declaration, she focused on the light within her, the strength she had nurtured during her long journey, the love and support of the villagers who had stood by her side. She had learned that she was not alone, that the power of her community, of their shared will to survive, was stronger than any darkness that sought to claim her. She breathed deeply, letting the warmth of that light fill her chest, pushing against the cold grip of fear that still tried to pull her under. Her vision began to clear, the darkness slowly retreating as the light within her grew brighter, more focused. I am not alone, she repeated, louder this time. I have the strength of the people who believe in me, and I will not let you take that away. The shadow that knows seemed to grow more frenzied as Selima's light intensified. It tried to lash out at her, wrapping around her with tendrils of darkness, but she stood firm, the warmth inside her pushing back, unyielding. Each time the shadow tried to claim her, she pushed harder, using the strength of her love for her village, her need to protect them, to fuel the light inside her. "You cannot defeat me," the shadow hissed. "I am eternal. I have always been, and I will always be." Salima's heart hammered in her chest, but she could feel her power building. She remembered Baba Sul's words about strength coming from within, from the courage of facing the darkness without letting it define you. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her people, for Zango, for the future they could build together. "I don't need to defeat you," Salima said, her voice calm and steady. "I just need to refuse to let you control me." With a final, powerful surge, she focused every ounce of energy she had left into her inner light, pushing it outward in a brilliant wave. The light washed over the darkness, illuminating the shadow in an almost blinding radiance. The shadow screamed, a horrible, shrill sound that seemed to shake the very earth beneath her feet. It recoiled, its form twisting and warping, unable to withstand the intensity of the light. And then, with a final shriek, it began to unravel, its dark form dissipating into nothingness, like smoke in the wind. Salima stood in the middle of the clearing, her body trembling with exhaustion, but the air around her felt lighter, warmer. The oppressive weight that had hung over her heart for so long was gone, lifted with the shadow's defeat. But as the silence settled, Salima realized that she wasn't alone. Out of the corner of her eye, Salima saw a figure standing at the edge of the clearing. A tall, cloaked figure, its face hidden in shadow, yet its presence unmistakable. "Who are you?" Salima called out, her voice still shaking from the battle. The figure stepped forward, and Salima's heart skipped a beat when she saw the gleam of ancient, otherworldly eyes watching her from beneath the hood. "I am someone who has been watching," the figure said, its voice deep, resonating with a strange power. "And I must say, I am impressed, Salima." Salima's senses heightened, and she instinctively took a step back. "What do you want? Who are you?" The figure lowered its hood, revealing the face of an ageless woman, her features both terrifying and beautiful, with an aura of wisdom and strength that seemed to defy time itself. "I am known as Adira, a keeper of ancient knowledge. I have been bound by the shadows of time, waiting for the one who would break the cycle and see beyond the veil." Salima narrowed her eyes, still on guard. "What do you mean?" "I've defeated the shadow that knows. I've broken the curse." Adira smiled faintly, but there was a trace of sadness in her expression. "You have done well, Salima. You have freed yourself from the shadow's grip. But the shadows are many, and the battle is not yet over. The shadow that knows was only a servant of something much larger, much older. A new age is dawning, and you will need more than just light to face what is coming." Salima's heart pounded in her chest. "What do you mean? What's coming?" Adira's eyes darkened, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "The shadows are stirring again, Salima. They are not finished with you, and neither am I. Your true test has only just begun." Salima's blood ran cold as the reality of Adira's words settled in. She thought she had won, that she had rid her world of the darkness that had haunted her. But now, it seemed, there was something even greater on the horizon. Adira turned to leave, her voice lingering in the air. "Prepare yourself, Salima. The next trial will test you in ways you cannot imagine." The figure disappeared into the night, leaving Salima alone in the clearing, her mind racing. The battle against the shadow that knows was not the end. It was only the beginning of something much, much darker. Salima returned to Zango with the knowledge that the peace she had fought so hard for was only temporary. Her heart was heavy, knowing that something greater than the shadow that knows was out there, waiting. As she walked through the village, she saw that the people were rebuilding, their faces filled with hope. But she knew the storm was far from over. Adira's words echoed in her mind, and she could feel the weight of the coming trial hanging over her. That night, as she sat alone, contemplating her next move, a sudden chill swept through the village. The wind howled, and a strange energy seemed to fill the air. A faint whisper, barely audible, drifted to her ears. "Salima." She turned, but no one was there. The whisper came again, this time louder, more insistent. "Salima." Her heart raced. She knew, deep in her bones, that this was only the beginning. What will Salima do now that the shadows are returning, and what darker forces are waiting to rise?